Hello and welcome to the Switchrpg podcast. I am one of your hosts, Gio, and I'm joined by two different people. What's going on here? I'm joined here by Evan.
Hello, Internet.
Hello, Internets. And I'm joined here by Mike.
What's up?
Mike. All right. Mike has been, I've been tagging him along here at PAX East. He's the video guy. He's doing a lot of the editing. So thank you again for doing that.
Mike,
and
the video guy.
The video guy. That's it. That's that. We're going to put that in the lower thirds.
Yep.
The video guy. So PAX East is wrapping up here. We've been doing a lot of stuff here for the site. So we have a lot of content coming up. But it's coming too close. We played a lot of really, really cool games. Talked to a lot of interesting people. So basically, that's what we're going to be talking about now. Evan, you've had a lot of interviews. Quite a number?
Spoken to a number of people, yes.
Okay, now what was your biggest surprise here for PAX?
Biggest surprise? Definitely getting a chance to speak with the creative director of Hindsight 2020, which, again, is not really a game that we've covered all that much on our website, but I've been kind of looking at it for a while, and on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it's a combat system that has moral effects on the entirety of the game.
Okay.
And, you think about role-playing, you think about a lot of action-adventure games, right? And, you've got your neutral ending, your kill kittens ending that's super evil, and then you've got your pacifist route where, everything is sunshine and rainbows, and that's probably the canon ending, right? But really what the creative director was telling me was that the first thing that they did with the game was they developed this engine that tracks every single combat decision that you make throughout the entirety of the game. And it trickles down into one of 5 endings that you can get for the game.
Okay.
And that's not including, there are some kind of earlier points where you can kind of end your entire playthrough. So that's a total of 9 endings throughout the entire game.
Holy cow.
Which is pretty impressive. I was pretty blown away by that info, but also just hearing about his creative vision for the game and really where they want to take the trajectory, because they've been talking a little bit about if this is successful, we've got kind of like Path of the Hero. If you're familiar with Breath of the Wild, you can track your progress. They've got that, but for every combat decision that you make throughout the game.
Really? So you can track all that via a map? Or?
Yeah. Well, so they have like your playthrough, and you can chart kind of where your choices are affecting.
It's really that finely grained.
Yeah. And they're saying if this is successful, we'd love to take that. And we'd love to not Baldur's Gate. What's the that strategy RPG?
Fire Emblem.
No. Well, that's strategy RPG. No, Banner Saga.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
They want to do the whole track progress across multiple playthrough or multiple games. Right. So your ending for the first game might maybe then change the character that you play as, or the original character from the first game appearing in the sequel and things like that.
Banner Saga does do that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so is it that type of game though, or what kind of game are we, or is it?
So it is an action adventure. That's how they describe it. You have a lot of missions taking place in a semi-open world town. And again, what they're saying is you've got these 2 weapons. You've got like an electric baton, and you've got this fire sword, right? And you can switch between them, at any point. And what they're saying is that, if you use the fire sword to kill a whole bunch of people, your reputation in the town changes, right? So, because you're living in a town where they're very much pacifists. Right, but they're also kind of hypocrites too, because there's like these demons who are entering in from another, realm, and they're like, oh, well, kill those guys, but you can't kill just normal people. Right. But so you have these really, fascinating mechanics where yes, the people, you'll see the population of the town increase if you kill fewer people. Mm-hmm. You'll see them attack you, but then it gets even more granular. For example, you've got this mission, right, where you need to kill or spare the sheriff of this town, right? And when I say sheriff, your mind might jump to, westerns, spaghetti westerns, or things like that. But the game really does have a very sort of Hindi vibe to it.
Okay.
And that's not the only game that I've seen even during this PAX that has Indian culture integrated into it, but it's got a very unique art style. So there's this mission where you have to pretty much disarm this sheriff, but he's also trying to talk one of your best friends into jumping off a building. Right. And so the thing is, if you take the pacifist route, it might be harder for you to incapacitate the sheriff so that you can then talk your own friend away from the ledge.
Right.
But if you don't take the pacifist route, right, and you kill the sheriff, you might get up to your friend. And then there's even dialogue options, too, where you can maybe pick the wrong answers and he jumps anyway.
Right.
But then there's one more aspect, which is, okay, you take the pacifist route, you don't kill the sheriff. But then later in the game, he might come back as a buffed boss, right? So you've got, and again, the creative director is like, I'm this kind of person who's a perfectionist. I obsess over every single choice I make. And I'm like, oh, great. You've made this game that will essentially drive you insane, right? But it seems like such a cool way of, because you've got combat as this central focus that trickles down into all the role playing you do throughout the game, which is really cool. And that's something that, when we talk about role playing, we're often talking about character progression and things like that. This is a game where you're definitely role playing through a specific mechanic, but it's really having an impact on all the other systems in the game.
Right. Now, I think Johnny is actually playing a game like that for the 3DS. Is it Radiant Historia?
Radiant Historia is more of a classic RPG.
Yeah, okay. It reminds me of that because of the branching narratives, the branching timelines. But in Radiant Historia, you can actually go back in time where you've made a decision and play it differently and play a completely different game. And it sounds like it's similar in that aspect.
Similar, yeah. Although I will say, the creative director said to me that, you're going to play through this game multiple times, and you'll notice that depending on the choices you make across those playthroughs, you might be at the same place in the game during multiple playthroughs, and you'll see that things are different. So I don't really think there's any sort of time traveling mechanics,
right.
But you definitely will see changes across the entirety of your playthrough. And in that way, I hope personally that we get a sort of Twitter-ish, a sort of social media aspect with this game, in the vein of like Breath of the Wild, where a lot of people were just going on a Twitter and being like, hey, check out this ridiculous thing that I did, or look at how this choice affected my gameplay in some way. And so that's like the ideal. Again, this is a game that I feel like not a lot of people have heard about, but it did win a Best in Show award at DreamHack.
Okay.
And that was like one of the first times that, a lot of the media were even getting a hands-on, impression of it. So I'm hoping that it starts to generate a little bit more noise, because it really is a very, fascinating experiment, and I want to see where it goes.
I certainly hadn't heard of it until you brought it up. So consider yourself. The job is done now. Currently, this is only out on Steam, or that's the.
So that's another thing too. So hindsight 2020 might not be coming out in 2020. Actually, they're aiming for a Q3 2020 release across multiple platforms. And again, I'm not really sure where consoles are fitting into that. But but again, they are demoing it right now, and it looks near to completion. They released. There's a PAX exclusive trailer, so only people who are here are going to be able to see this trailer, and they say that they're going to share this trailer. So unfortunately, we can't share it, but they're going to show this trailer when they announce the release date. So I'm assuming that if they've got this, then they should probably be announcing that pretty soon.
Excellent. Now, you, sir, you've been here following me along. What is your biggest takeaway, biggest kind of more surprise for PAX here?
Oh god, biggest surprise. I didn't even know Maneater existed until I came here. And we walked by that booth and saw like the trailer and stuff, and I was like, wow, this game is insane.
Yeah, it looks absolutely bonkers.
I had no idea I needed this game, but I do need it.
And and like just standing there as we were kind of getting ready to interview the president there,
Yep.
he like people were just standing there just watching.
Everyone had the same reaction.
Like,
They
wow,
walked by,
I didn't know I needed this.
Yeah.
Like it's like everyone was just going absolutely nuts about it. I think that that Maneater showed up on like some sort of Nindy or Nintendo Direct, something that they had.
Definitely. And is that a Devolver game?
It is not a Devolver game.
Because I was gonna say it's like such a Devolver ass like concept. You know, they're all about balls to the wall sorts of games, and that's Maneater is just so much that.
Yeah,
but it's also a really deep RPG.
Right.
Like it looks ridiculous and it's insane, but it's also pretty deep. There are a lot of insane RPG mechanics in that.
Yeah,
game.
they were kind of going over a lot of the stuff as we were playing.
Yeah.
And you can, like, as you're eating other things, they provide you different nutrients, and those nutrients kind of determine how your character grows. So if you're eating a lot of catfish or turtles or whatever, it will change in how your body actually adapts
or
evolves because you actually start off as a tiny baby shark, and then as you eat, you progressively get bigger and bigger and grow older. And again, depending on what you eat will depend on how your body changes.
Yeah, it's a mix of like a leveling system and an like actual evolving system, because you don't get equipment. You just upgrade your shark, and he can either have like a bone evolution where it's just balls to the walls, attack, damage, or he can gain like this like shock thing where it's more for stunning enemies, and then there's one called Shadow where he's more like a vampire, where he like sucks more of the nutrients out of people, and he's more stealthy.
Yeah, one of the adaptations were like, depending on what you were eating, you would grow like kind of bony body armor, so you'd get more defensive.
You know, the concept reminds me of, and, you know, I am not sure if I'm getting the name right, but I'm pretty sure Evo Path to Eden or something like that.
Oh, that was here last year, wasn't it?
Well, I'm talking about a Genesis game, actually.
Oh.
This is a long time ago.
It was not here
No,
last year.
definitely not. But this was an old Genesis game where you start as like a single cell organism, and you're tasked by Gaia to like prevent, I don't know, the dinosaurs from taking over Earth or something like that. But you grow from this, you know, single cell organism into first, you know, in your, you know, aquatic biome, and there is, you know, a lot of, you know, oh, I eat this enemy and then I upgrade into this kind of animal. But it seems a lot more granular in Maneater, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would think in the Genesis days that, you know, you really can't get that in depth in some things.
Definitely.
But Maneater definitely was a surprise. Now, I do remember seeing it, and I'm like, there's no way this is an RPG, because the trailer doesn't really show any of those
when we were
things.
driving here, you're like, did you see that game Maneater? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you're like, it's an RPG where you're a shark and you just eat people.
Right.
And I'm like, how can that be an RPG? That doesn't even make sense.
And the way they describe the combat is more like aerial combat, kind of like dogfighting.
Yeah.
In the way, so if you're fighting against an alligator, okay, you would change your tactics and learn the enemy's movements, which is why they call it Shark Souls, where you're where you got to learn the enemy's animations and kind of go from there. You got to learn when the enemy's vulnerable and attack and dodge and all that stuff.
And it's kind of cool where how like different locations that you go to have bosses dedicated to that spot.
Right.
Like an apex predator is there and you need to take over.
Right.
So will I be fighting any bears?
You can actually grow an adaptation, they did say, where you can prolong your time out of water.
Okay. I'm definitely interested now.
Shark versus
So
bear.
it is a possibility. I don't know if a bear exists, but you can potentially go on the beach.
I mean, we're talking about man-eaters here, so, you know, a bear could be around there somewhere. But
it's a possibility, because when you first actually start the game, you're a pup. You're a smaller shark. You're actually in freshwater. Bull sharks. I'm kind of a marine enthusiast, I guess you could say. Bull sharks tend to be in fresh water, and they start off in Louisiana as a bull pup, and you're attacking alligators. So there are other man-eaters there as well. So if you continue to eat the alligator's main source of food, which is catfish, that lures out their main boss.
Cool. So there's some ecosystem, you know, sort of interactions as well going on here. That's pretty neat. Yeah.
It's a cool game.
Yeah, I mean, again, I also remember seeing it, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it was on like an indie sort of feature or something like that. And again, the way that it was presented was kind of like, oh, this is a kooky shark sim game,
Right.
and I was like, oh, that's cool.
Well, it had that, like you said, digital devolver kind of like tone to it.
Definitely, yeah. But hearing about a lot of this progression stuff makes me much more curious about the game. For sure,
it was definitely a lot deeper than I thought it was. That's for sure.
When he started explaining everything, I was like, wow.
Yeah,
it's a lot of stats and stuff that you can upgrade,
and it visually like it looks really really cool. Like a lot of people don't you don't really get to see what's on the water other than when it's on TV or whatever. But like some of the environmental designs underwater was really really interesting and intricate too in some of those areas.
Yeah.
So my question is, usual RPG progression is start, small town, end up killing God. So are we going to eventually fight Cthulhu? Because that's like the sea equivalent of God.
I don't think we're going to fight Cthulhu
Poseidon, perhaps,
or Aquaman or any of those. There is an overarching villain.
Oh.
He is a kind of a shark hunter.
Ah.
And that might be your boss. He's a human, so...
the most dangerous game, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm into it.
Yeah, it was really really interesting. So yeah, thanks for asking, guys.
No one cares.
No one cares. Was my biggest surprise was actually Genshin Impact.
Oh well, of course.
I mean, because of the kind of like, I guess you could call it bad publicity that they got.
Right.
And initially it was actually their doing because they had an initial trailer, and yes, it definitely looked like it was heavily inspired by Breath of the Wild. And they don't deny that. They don't. I mean, you can't really deny.
They pretty much wear it on their sleeve.
Yeah, you can't deny it. But I think what Genshin Impact does is kind of, it takes what Breath of the Wild really did well, and it kind of multiplies that. It kind of adds on to it. There's magic mechanics involved in Genshin Impact, and the way they described it was a game that really resonates with me is Divinity Original Sin 2, where you could potentially... he brought up some examples where he would light the grass on fire and then change character and then use a wind character and blow that fire everywhere and kind of surround himself with fire. Any enemies coming in, they're going to get lit up. So that environmental change, and it really, like I said, it really touches on that Divinity Original Sin 2 thing.
Yeah, and so what you're talking about, a lot of people who might be familiar with like Mark Brown's, Game Maker's Toolkit sort of videos and things like that, he talks a lot about systemic games, right, which are these games that utilize or have a system, and the developers essentially say, all right, what can we do to make sure that this system is, interactive with almost everything else? And really, again, I was watching one of the first gameplay vids that was posted on our Discord, and like one of the first things that happens is the character is by this river and switches to this other, rapier style fighter, and he uses an ice attack and freezes the water, and it creates like a small bridge, and he walks out onto the water, and I'm like, yes, I want it. Sign me up, because I love environmental interaction, systems like that. And I actually did also get to see an unannounced action RPG from super.com that uses a lot of sort of systemic elements as well. And I can't talk too much about it, but it's definitely something that, like Genshin Impact, my interest is much more heightened now that I see, okay, the developers are really trying to implement these systems in a variety of different ways.
Right.
So, I mean, and it's, it's crazy because even on the floor, like Genshin's got this big, sign and everything like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, when I first come in, I'm like, I can understand, like, they've probably got a lot of marketing or something like that. But then I go over to the booth, and they've got so many setups there, and so many people are standing there for like 15, 20 minutes just wanting to experiment with these systems because it's a really cool looking game.
It really is.
Now, I'm curious to see, different environments, because a lot of the gameplay that I was seeing was very much don't want to say Great Plateau-ish,
Right,
but
right.
very much greenery. And,
Plains.
Yeah. And so I want to see where else we can go. But, if they are delivering on that promise of, iterating on Breath of the Wild, I think that this is a game that everybody should be looking out for a multitude of reasons, because as you even said to me earlier,
Right.
this is free.
Yeah, it's a free to play, and I was gonna say that it's a free to play game. When they told me that, I didn't know that, and I was like, wait, this is a free to play game? Like how like you guys should be charging, like it should be a full price game in my opinion.
For sure.
He said that to you, and I was like, I couldn't really hear because I was filming kind of a little far away. And I was like, did he just say it's a free to play game? He's like, yeah. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, and the game is really deep in terms of gameplay. So they're going to continue to support this game for a while, it seems.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder, are we going to have some sort of games as a service pay-ins that we'll have down the line? Because again, with a game of this quality, even just from what I've seen on the show floor and things like that, and from trailers, I would be willing to pay money to support this game.
Sure.
Because it's that impressive. And, when we say Breath of the Wild, obviously in terms of systems, but also in terms of visuals, the animations are gorgeous.
I was going to say the character animations and like the fighting looks insane.
And even, I think this build now finally has English voice acting too.
It does.
Yeah, which is really impressive.
Yep. It has English voice acting. Now, they did say that they're possibly going to be supporting the game via microtransactions. But it's a single player experience. So it reminds me a little bit of what Shadows of War did, where you can speed up the game if you want to. I mean, I'm not for that myself, because I would never want to ruin the experience for that. I'd want to progressively, complete the game.
Of course.
But they are going to implement that sort of mechanic. And they just said this is going to be sort of like a games as a service, where they just continue to expand upon it. He said this game is going to be just a massive game. Like, he couldn't even quantify like a game time. He just said it's probably never going to end. They're just going to keep doing it. They did mention kind of Great Plateau-ish. He did mention different environments. So it'll be similar in what Breath of the Wild does there. But one thing that Breath of the Wild lacks that this will also have, Genshin Impact, is bigger towns, cities. So the scale is a little bit bigger, I think. Here it's going to have more NPCs, more interaction with the environment and all that stuff. So
and I mean, that being said, here's hoping that Breath of the Wild 2 might have some more of those elements as well. But if that doesn't, and you're left wanting more, I mean, Genshin Impact really does seem like the game.
Fit that.
It is one of the games that, walking away from this PAX, I feel like if not a lot of people are talking about this already, they should be, because it had a great showing.
Yeah, and he did mention, I did ask him about the kind of the negative feedback that they had gotten regarding Breath of the Wild, and they in themselves, they hold Breath of the Wild on a pedestal. They have on
a plateau.
On a plateau. My apologies. And oh geez, what was I going to say?
Negative feedback.
Oh yes, negative feedback. And they say that's mostly an Asian thing. That when they come here to the Western market, they don't see any of that. It's more of like, I think it was I forget what conference it was where most of that negativity was. It was a China Joy or Japanese Joy or something of that. I don't remember exactly what it was called. But most of it is the Asian market that is really kind of almost offended that there's this clone or whatever. I don't consider it a clone, but definitely Breath of the Wild inspired. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I find that surprising, considering this that market is very much dedicated to, or the developers in that market tend to make a number of products that are very much like one another.
Yes.
Perhaps in a series as well.
I agree.
But I also think that the Western mentality towards a lot of games and things like that, when you talk about Shadow of Mordor, or Assassin's Creed. We have a pretty well-realized idea of what an open world game should look like. And so really it's about, okay, what new mechanics are being introduced that enhance this experience? And if we see a game like Breath of the Wild, which received, a wide amount of critical acclaim, we see that being iterated upon in ways that perhaps, that initial release, which was great, could have, definitely improved in some areas.
Sure.
Why wouldn't we be excited for that?
Right. I totally agree.
In terms of anything else at PAX that caught your eye, any thoughts?
Baldur's Gate is definitely something that's right up my alley. Again, with Divinity Original Sin 2 and Larian Studios behind Baldur's Gate. This is just...
I've decided to build a gaming PC just for Baldur's Gate 3. That game is going to blow my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, me and you are like huge Divinity fans, and it looks like... I mean, there are some complaints that it looks too much like Divinity, but Divinity was really good, and the game should look like Divinity. Right. They hired Larian Studios
for that
because of Divinity, so it makes sense that the game is Divinity-esque. But there's still a lot of new stuff that Divinity doesn't have.
There's tons of new stuff. There's a lot
more D&D.
Yeah, a lot of D&D integration with it. They had like the dice rolling and
all the percentages are based off of like character stats and skills that would be calculated through doing math on a piece of paper.
Right, and they didn't show it in the demo that they had, the live demo, but on another demo that we saw, you can actually hover over the interactions, kind of what's happened, and this is it called a status or whatever it is, whatever
activity log or something.
Some sort of activity log, and when you hover over that, it actually breaks it down. So it breaks down the stats like dexterity modified this or whatever. So it actually gets even more.
It'll say like your dexterity +2, and then your base attack bonus, and then everything else.
Goes into
how it
calculated that. But all that is done again behind the scenes.
Yeah. Right. You don't have to worry about it.
I mean, that's something that as a fan of role-playing games and, as someone who's played a lot of Japanese RPGs, there's eventually this scaling of damage and things like that that kind of you become kind of separated from really the sort of statistics that are factoring into that sort of calculation. And so having a feature like that is very welcome, and it keeps the gameplay really tangible to you, which again, if you're a fan of tabletop stuff like you guys are, and I am too, you definitely want to see that stuff.
Yeah, it's the whole reason why we have character sheets and all of that stuff. Now, the biggest complaint are from Baldur's Gate fans.
I will fight any Baldur's Gate fan over this game.
We're not fighting. Are from Baldur's Gate fans, and those are the CRPG. I consider them the CRPG crowd, and myself, I consider CRPGs kind of an antiquated way of playing games. To be honest, I'm not a fan of them. I don't consider Divinity Original Sin 2 a CRPG kind of in the classic sense. It's more of a strategy type of game. And again, the backlash you're seeing are from the hardcore Baldur's Gate fans. They want a clone of their game. The Divinity guys want kind of their thing.
I think it's a good mix, though.
I think so too.
I'm so happy they didn't go with original Baldur's Gate like combat like that.
I wouldn't have been.
I wouldn't have gotten the game.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't.
I find it funny that that Baldur's Gate fans should be upset by this because Baldur's Gate is inspired by D&D, which it seems like Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of embracing a little bit more
of the D&D,
the tabletop aspect. So, if anything, Baldur's Gate fans, you cool your jets. Let us D&D fans be kind of excited about
this.
Exactly.
And they've literally only showed like an hour.
Yeah.
It hasn't even been much.
It's like right past the tutorial.
Right. There isn't much in terms of gameplay. Another complaint I've seen is the environments are too bright. Everything should be darker and kind of grim.
I thought the dungeon looked pretty dark.
But listen, we've only seen an hour of the game. This is going to be a massive, massive game. So there's got to be some variety there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anybody saw the pictures of the booth, but there's like literally an eldritch abomination standing outside of it. So I'm pretty sure things are going to get darker.
Oh, without a doubt, things will get darker. But
I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, and I won't be building a PC rig for this, but I'm glad that you are. Now, what about for any disappointments?
Well, I mean, what really has disappointed me is the amount of floor space dedicated to Animal Crossing New Horizons. And for all you Animal Crossing fans, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Yeah, not the biggest fan.
It's not a joke. I'm not an Animal Crossing fan either. I think it's got the niche for them. It's a very relaxing game. It's just too much work. It's kind of not my thing.
Well, I mean, but if there is one thing that I would take away from this as kind of a disappointment is the lack of showing that Nintendo has.
That's actually what I was going to say is but even beforehand, they were very, very quiet as to what they were going to show. Yeah. I assumed Animal Crossing, but I just assumed more than Animal Crossing.
Not just, taking photos with Isabelle and KK Slider.
Or Tom Nook.
I'm not even sure if he's there.
I have no idea. I don't know these guys.
Sorry, guys. I'm not into the Animal Crossing lore.
But whatever. It's not an RPG, so we're we're pushing away from the table there.
Right, yeah, and I'm just surprised to see, right, we've got there's a demo when you first enter the venue for Pokemon Sword and Shield, which, whatever. Honestly, and again, I don't know how much progress they've made on the expansion packs to that game, but if you were to show that off, I'm sure that many more people would be swarming those Pokemon demo booths. But then you've got, so many indies here who have Switch setups, who are saying, "Oh, play the game on Switch." I'm kind of surprised because we've had a couple of indie presentations prior to events like PAX that have been like, "Oh, by the way, here's something that's coming soon," and a game like Maneater would definitely shoot up on a lot of people's radar if you're not someone necessarily who follows PAX news all that much, right? But you follow the indie, presentations. You see that, and then you start reading about all this PAX news about Maneater, and your interest is going to skyrocket. Sorry, sure. And hopefully the sales of that will be even better. So yeah, just the quietness on Nintendo's part. But I think in a lot of ways, I mean, when we think about games that are being demoed, Baldur's Gate 3 is like a huge reveal for this show.
Sure.
But in terms of other large, reveals or announcements or things like that, not all that much here.
Right. It's been relatively quiet on that.
It's pretty quiet PAX in general.
Yeah.
Sony dropping out, I think, is the reason for that. It's just, there's so much space.
Right.
In the expo hall.
Even with Sony dropping out, yes, there's more room on the floor here. We can dance around. Definitely noticed that. But they weren't showing all too much. They were going to show The Last of Us 2. They were going to show that off. But Final Fantasy VII Remake is here.
Right.
What was some?
It's here in full force.
But it also just feels like a smaller PAX in general, and not just because of
Less
Sony.
To see.
There's just usually there's
in
Magic Arena that's here. There's big tournaments that are going on, and there's just none of that this year.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen a couple of booths for new showings of new IPs and things like that. I'm not sure, is the Magic MMO being shown here?
Is it an MMO?
There's
or
a
is
Magic
it kind of
Legends. I think it's more of a Diablo-esque.
I think
RPG.
that might be the one that I'm thinking of. Right, so that's being shown.
That is being shown, but that's not coming out for a while. Yeah. So I mean, they're showing some of it, but it just seems like way too early to be showing that game.
Yeah,
it looks cool though.
Yeah, for sure. And on one hand, bigger developers, bigger publishers not really being here might feel like a detriment, but also I've had a number of great conversations and seen a number of great games from smaller devs who
definitely.
I've been pretty pleased with that stuff. And also, I guess The lack of bigger publishers has also made me kind of cross the lines into the tabletop section a little bit, and man, it blows my mind. I just recently played, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, Gloomhaven for the first time.
I am familiar. Haven't played it yet.
But I mean, it's a monster of a game. But and I saw also, we were talking about Baldur's Gate. We're talking about Divinity. I saw the Divinity board game, and this concept of now board games that are chapter based, where you continue to come back and you play the same campaign again and again. I'm seeing a lot more of that, on the floor and things like that. But also, I did not realize how many tabletop games are taking video game concepts and just turning them into tabletop concepts. I bought a board game box, just a mystery box of 4 different tabletop games. And like the major takeaway that I had was this weird IP that is like, oh, we're taking 1v1 arcade fighting mechanics and turning it into a tabletop game.
Oh, really?
And I was like, oh, okay.
It works, right?
Well, yeah, it does work, and it is pretty cool. But that is surprising, and so it's kind of cool to see how tabletop games and how video games really, despite their differences in presentation, there is a lot of crossover in that area. I mean, we talk about our favorite RPGs. We're talking about, Divinity and stuff like that. And so much of that is rooted in tabletop games. It's kind of cool to see how video game concepts are now kind of being integrated back into tabletop mechanics. And, I think both scenes are going to grow. They're continuing to grow, obviously. But that is just, that's a cool thing to see at a PAX like this.
Right. As I've said, the tabletop scene just continues to creep into the video game area.
And I feel like that was the busiest area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time we'd go over there, you couldn't even move.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, Mario or The Legend of Zelda Monopoly is all well and good, but wouldn't it be cool to like play a tabletop game that had Mario or Zelda mechanics integrated into it? I don't know how you would even do that, but I've seen people do other things like turn fighting games into tabletop mechanics, so I'm pretty sure it can happen.
It could definitely happen.
Yeah.
Did you have any disappointments?
No, not really.
You're pretty just kind of... Was there anything that you guys wanted to play but maybe just didn't get a chance to? Maybe Baldur's Gate?
Yeah, Baldur's Gate. I was hoping they were going to have some kind of, like, we were going to be able to play that demo. Yeah. They didn't even have merch at their booth. I wanted a Baldur's Gate shirt. Like, I wanted everything Baldur's Gate. So in that sense, they disappointed me. What was the question?
Was there something out there that you wanted to get to but maybe didn't?
Oh, I did want to play Magic Legends too.
Oh, yeah.
But the line for that was ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, and, that's another just part of being at a con. That's a con of being at a con.
Oh, boy.
No, sorry.
And you write for Switchrpg, right?
I do, yeah.
So the puns are...
Check in for more puns at Switchrpg.
The puns are aplenty.
But... I heard you guys got your hands on Trials of Mana.
Yes.
Which I'm hoping at some point to take a look at. Also, again, another game I can't say enough about is coming really soon, April 16th to Nintendo Switch and all other platforms, Hellpoint.
Oh, yes.
Small booth for Hellpoint, so not a lot of people are getting their hands on it, but you could stand behind them and watch them and see that this is, especially for the Switch, which we've had a lot of action RPGs. We've talked about Animus before, which,
you and I have both.
Whatever, it's fine. We've got our Dark Souls, right, which is fine. But Hellpoint is a Souls-like for the Switch, and it's got, you've got your invade mechanics, you've got your assist mechanics, but it's also like Event Horizon sci-fi horror, which that has all of the things that I personally love. So I'm super excited about this. I want to get my hands on the game.
Yep.
We'll see if that happens today.
Yeah. I think they have only like 1 or 2 stations for Hellpoint.
Yeah.
In their tiny build area.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tiny area.
Oh, boy,
the tiny
here
build
we go.
area.
More puns. More puns here.
Sorry.
But I think that's going to actually wrap up today's episode. We're actually out of time for the space here. So the people are coming in.
They're going to kick us out.
It's making me nervous. But thank you guys for joining me.
I mean, it's been great to see both of you guys in real life. I was kind of, and again, if you check my Twitter, I was creeping on Geo the other day, but it really is cool to come out here. And I've been to a lot of comic conventions, but I've never been to a game centric convention. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to see how much of a presence we have here. I mean, that the community has here, that the representation is really cool. And it's great to just see you guys and realize, hey,
we're real people.
You are real people.
But yeah, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye.